in my workings with them in conservation, we just got through with a big brouhaha. This group came in, they bought up this farm, grant money comes from the government, which is your tax dollars. They bought up this old farm, the purpose of which was to revitalize agriculture and farming in the area. Something I'm an advocate of. I belong to my town's agricultural committee. I would love to see more farming. I would love to see our town sustainable in its own food supply. Yeah. That's not going to happen here. I asked them, please, I says, you're about to take this piece of property in perpetuity, because that's the way the language is written out in the state grants as they're divvied out. These have got to be in perpetuity. You know, I can't advocate on behalf of the citizens in town and say, hey, can we try this for 10 years and see if it works, or 20 years or something? No deal. It had to be in perpetuity. We went around and around about the conditions, and there are so many. As you'll see, please take a copy of this DVD. They'll explain to you that the conditions in these CRs are so burdensome that it literally turns a good, productive piece of property with potential into something that's just unusable. It's got so many restrictions, and in this case, there's plenty of examples where they've taken over a farm, they purchased it, purchased the development rights in perpetuity, and then they try to lease it out to some sucker who wants to make a go of it. Then they want to put up a shed to hold their tools. Well, I can't have no sheds on the property. Well, I want to do, well, you can't do that either. So they're failed business prospects. From a simple macroeconomic viewpoint, I tried arguing with these land trusts. I said, I don't think you've got a viable business plan here. They didn't care, they didn't want to hear about it. I said, all right, how about this? I will concede on all these other conditions that I think are overbearing if you do one thing. Put in one sentence under exemptions that all agriculture-related activity is exempt. Because that's what they build themselves as, big savers of farms. Nothing doing. They flat out told me no way. Not only did their land trust not want to entertain that, but they reconfirmed what I knew right along, is that the state grants were structured to intentionally not allow for that. So if they can't own it, they're going to control it through zoning. And these land trusts, they are coming up all around you. I found several of them here from the Cape. In fact, you've got a woman right from this town who is one of the biggest advocates of preservation, belongs to several of the land trusts, been awarded many times over. And I would love it for someone in this area to dig around in some of these documents and see just how good it is for the Cape area. And I submit to you, you're probably going to find that it is very stifling on property rights and on productivity. Many of these properties have become encumbered by these land trusts, fall out of productivity, and will never be productive again. Now, I agree 100% with what Hal said earlier, is that this is an elusive topic that not a lot of people are familiar with. And there is room to make a difference. And I say that because I've watched them tremble. When you come up and you ask them the right questions, when you point out some of the flaws in their proposed legislation, when you find an example of a farm that's failed around the corner, humna, they run out of qualified things to say. And your regional planners is something you're going to have to deal with. They're enrooted. We went from, many of you probably remember, a few years back, we used to have a county sheriff that meant something. All right, they got rid of it and disassembled county government or regional government, said it was too expensive, they said it was corrupt, so they just did away with it. Then they turned right around and talking out the other side of their mouth said, hey, we need to regionalize. Wouldn't that be a great way to save money and resources? Well, you know, they just had a regional network in place that included a sheriff with authority. They dissolved that and they started a new one. You got to ask yourself the big question, why? They had a regional system, dissolved it, then cried that they wanted a regional system. One offered some protections for us, the citizens, and one was wrapped right around sustainable development and smart growth. Now, sustainable development is not what it's being portrayed as on TV. And the property owners, I'm convinced after working with so many people in the conservation office, I am convinced that the best stewards of the land are the ones that own the property themselves. Why would a farmer shoot himself in the foot by doing something that would intentionally decrease productivity due to some environmental impacts? It's not going to happen. People who just in a residential situation, they take care of their properties because it enhances their property value. One of the gentlemen, he was supposed to square off with me because I was pretty upset about this. I didn't want to see my town go down in flames. I proposed a committee called the Sustainable Development and Regionalization Oversight Committee. I had one person in town who was a citizen that showed up at the town meeting to speak against it. She is a former conservation commissioner. She has pushed more enforcement orders on the citizens in town than anybody. She is part of a network of rogue eco-extremists, I'll call them, that go around trespassing on private property all over the place. If there's someone who's proposing to develop a house in an area that they don't necessarily want a house at, well, all of a sudden there's a certified vernal pool there. I've been tracking these people. I got a pile of 40 of them came into my office, and I started calling up the property owners. I said, were you aware that it was an evaluation on your property? No. Did you get permission for anyone to enter your property? No. Don't look for these green activists to play by the rules. They're not going to. They're going to go and they're going to get massive chunks of your property just by filling out a form. And this is a system built to be abused. If you go on to National Heritage website and you go to this section on certifying vernal pools, the first paragraph in big red letters says, we advise that you get permission before you enter a property. It's not mandatory. It's not mandated under state law. Anyone in this room could go in, pull up a GIS picture or Google Maps or anything, correspond it with a data layer. There's a specific data layer on Oliver Mass GIS called potential vernal pools. All right, that's all that is a satellite flying over and seeing a depression. It could be your in-ground pool that's been defunct for a few years and just a hole in the ground. Probably going to show up as a potential vernal pool on this overlay. My point is, any of us in this room could sit down, download the form, do a little mapping here and there, go over and find an endangered species that's found in the area, fill it in, send it in, and you have just encumbered somebody's property rights. And there is a army of people out there doing that right now. One of the individuals that was supposed to come to a town meeting and square off against me was in the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Once I got a name, I researched him, found out that he is obviously a member of Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. He helped write the proposed CLRPA bill, and he's also a planner in Shutesbury. And I apologize, my printer literally ran out of green ink as I was printing this. But this green and blue all through here should all be green. These lines are roads, and there's a little pink square right there. Now that pink square, judging by the scale, is 1,700 feet by about 700 or 800 feet. What does that say, Tom, on my glasses?
Roadside residential district, town center district, lake district.
Roadside residential. And this, all this green is conservation area. There's still roads in here, by the way. You just don't see them on the map. But if you want to go live in Shutesbury and you want to build a house in Shutesbury, you darn well better fall right on the side of this road within 300 feet. Don't think you're going to do anything up here. If you already have a home here, don't think you're going to expand anything. All these things that I told you were in the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report that are considered unsustainable by the UN are considered unsustainable here. If you live there, you won't. If you farm there, you won't. This is the type of guy that runs it in Shutesbury. So if you want the rest of Massachusetts to look like Shutesbury does, well, this is the guy that wrote CLRPA. And that's what you'll get if this bill gets through. So if there's Republican activists in the room that would like to investigate and take up a good cause, that being fighting for the property rights of people in this country and in this state. So that's where it all comes from, is property rights. Our body being our first piece of property. We're under attack where you can buy the property outright and pay the taxes year after year, but they're going to control what you do with it through zoning, and their zoning comes from the regional entities, and the regional entities get it from the UN. There's a direct correlation, and I can put a document that connects the dot right from your town, right up to that document.
So this CLERBA bill, is this a state bill or is this a federal bill? What is it?
Yeah, this is state. It's, let's see, this is the old version. It was one in the last session, and it was very quiet. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. Anyone hear about statewide zoning reform at all? Did you?
Yeah, it's part of SMART bill, is what it's tied into.
Yeah.
All the funding for the sewer expansions, the low sewer rates for the funding are based on adopting SMART bill.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I found it a little strange that there wasn't more chatter about it, because in the last congressional session it was 2482. It's a different bill number now, but to answer your question, Roland, it is Massachusetts legislation, and it is a complete rewrite of our zoning laws as they currently exist.
So where's this bill at now? What stage of this is?
It's in committee right now. Unfortunately, the committee that it's sitting in is the committee that it reported out of in the final hours of the last session. This is going to, when it moves, it's going to move fast. I've been in communication with a few of my legislators. Some of them I got the ear of, and you can tell almost instantly the interaction that Al mentioned earlier. When you run into someone who is just a big advocate or up to their eyeballs in this stuff, they're going to turn right off and not want to hear a word you have to say. But we cannot stop. We have got to put people in their office. We've got to be calling. And please read the actual text of the bill and judge it against property rights for one thing. But think about, is your community going to be able to have that lateral movement? Are you going to be able to make local decisions that are going to allow you to go on being a viable community? The thing that triggered a lot of attention in my town is we already got a pretty high ratio of Section 8 and low-income housing. So it isn't like, you know, we're below the average or anything like that for the state or national. We've got more than our share. But they're going to mandate it in this. They are going to mandate it, and lo and behold, like I showed you in the targeting, they're putting the low income where we're trying to bring jobs right now. This is a control mechanism. This is the way I see it. It's gotten so dark and interconnected with things that are just not even domestic, that this is just a way to control from the national level and the federal level our activities here in our own towns. And that's not the nation that I'm accustomed to, and it's not how we got where we are now. It wasn't through control, it was through individual expressions.
Can you repeat the name of that bill?
On the Comprehensive Land Use Reform and Partnerships Act, CLERPA.
Thanks.
Dave, is that available on the Mass LPA website? And if not, can we get it up there, that bill?
I am still in the process of trying to find a way of explaining everything to not only the importance of this exact bill, but tying it into the UN Sustainable Development. And it's a hard thing to do, because there's some people, you mention the UN, even before I go into a specific topic about the UN, you're a conspiracy theorist or you're worrying about things that don't matter. So I'm trying it, and I'm going to level with you. You folks are kind of my own little experiment today. I want to see how you're going to react to how this plays in your streets of your own town. Are you going to relate to what I'm saying and what Hal said, and honestly leave here understanding that there are people at the non-domestic level that create these treaties and this language, and boy, you find ways of incorporating it at the local level. And I'm trying to get a sense, am I going to be able to convince people of that? Because that's what I would like to do, is connect all the dots, Hal, and we are going to get the current version up there. I had a heck of a time getting this too. In fact, I was told a number of stories between last session and this session. And because of that, I'm suspicious when it moves, it's gonna move quick. It's laying there quiet. Now, this is something that every one of your town fathers should be on the phone with their representatives and senators about right now. This is no small amendment. This is a massive rewrite of zoning reform and is being rewritten to accommodate smart growth and sustainable development.
Through Agenda 21, I saw in the research I've seen that they can come and take your property through
Eminent
eminent
domain.
domain without any type of compensation whatsoever, you know, subverting the Constitution altogether. And that's basically what this is talking about as well, this new zoning laws?
Yes, it does it in a disguised way, though. They'll create special overlay districts, like the ones that have to do with scenes and views and stuff like that. I mean, I just can't find anything. I know there's a couple constitutions in this room, and if there's someone can find a section in there that says that we should be taking one person's property rights for another person's view, please tell me. I haven't seen it there. So this is a throttle. This is also going to be used as a throttle for the economy. Let's face it, business-friendly communities are going to be hard to find under smart growth and sustainable development. They're going to be compacted into these little industrial areas, and in those zones, like we saw, they've got what is equivalent to spot zoning. It's currently illegal now. They're codifying it. They're going to make it legal under this. Now, the thing with the solid waste, the hazardous waste, mandate that those things be processed and dealt with in our industrial areas. Industrial is now mixed use, so you can have a factory where half the building, the stack them and pack them Section 8 here, and over there they're going to be treating waste materials. There's a lot that lacks in terms of common sense, but once you've gone through it, I mean, I just did a once through on this, and I had no problems filling margins. What I'm going to have up on the site now eventually is definitely the most updated version of the law. We're going to have a how-to. We need people to be armed with the right questions and the right comments to go to their legislators and let them know why this is going to hurt us. We don't have to harp on the UN thing. We can just stand and plant our feet firmly on the Constitution and say, you're taking our private property rights. Constitutional rights are being subverted by this. And in the first paragraph or two, it says, you know, that they're going to do it. They come right out and say so. So, please pay attention to that. Look it up if you haven't already. Check out Mass LPA. We're going to have much more information up there on that. The video that we talked about showing today, there's 5 of them. They're all good. They're all on the Freedom Advocates website. If you go there, they're the ones that spearheaded this long before we did. But the one that caught my attention, and I'm so glad I got to interview this woman, is Beverly Ekman. And she's a former chief editor for NASA's official newspaper. And she was actually involved in propaganda, how to sell concepts to people. And in particular, this whole consensus thing. Now, I've been to a couple of these meetings, and Bob, he's around here somewhere. Bob and a few other people joined me in Somerville. I think you were there too, Tom, weren't you? They were trying to pass forced vaccination here in Massachusetts. And I got another email through my conservation office because they were cherry picking, trying to get people to come in and support this. And I called up and registered, and I let a few of my buddies know. We showed up. And the very first slide on their presentation was how willing would the public be to accept what they called the full throttle approach to vaccination. No lie, I've got their PowerPoint pronounced. And it was a textbook consensus session. 6, maybe 7 people at a table, not more, not less. Each table had its own facilitator. And they always say, oh, I'm here just to keep the peace and make sure we stay on topic. We had a private vote, so no one knew how the others voted. And then at the end of the whole thing, they go through and they collect all the votes from the different tables, and they get up and make their grand announcement that that was a consensus of all the health professionals in Massachusetts Now, I'm a conservation guy, I somehow got in there myself, so I'm not a health professional, but that's what the press release read as. And lo and behold, just about every table had people there, at least half of them, that were against such a heavy-handed approach. I mean, that's a complete violation of your first piece of property, your body, all right? I've seen them work that way. The one that I went to with the sustainable development, like I said, there were 5 people. They handled it a different way. They didn't need a facilitator. But this woman, Beverly Ekman, I really, really hope you stay. It's not a very long documentary video at all. But she lays it out far better than I ever could. Check out the website. I've got a 1-hour interview that I've done with her where I tried to get her to talk about locally how these things are coming to play. But a very, very important tool for you to have, because if you watch this and you go home and you pick up your paper or you turn on the local news, you're going to start hearing little buzzwords and little meetings that are going on that normally, you know, you wouldn't care about. Please start caring about them. Go to them and see what they're talking about. Collect their handouts. Everything that they hand out, you want a copy of when you leave. And you will see that what she explains in here, it's a science. The Delphi technique, which you mentioned earlier, is a variant of that, and it has been used over and over and over again. It's incorporated into our public schools. That's why we're turning out good global citizens and environmental voters, because they use these same techniques on our kids. And unfortunately, many of the adults today don't have the initiative to recognize this, and when they do, to do something about it. The good news in that, and there is good news, is that these things can be blown out of the water. If you know what's being done to you, you can stop it. And Bob will testify to that. Enough of us showed up in Somerville that we destroyed their consensus coming out of it. First half, it was working good, believe me. They were on their way to getting us saying, well, you know, if we have a real bad swine flu, it's only right that everyone, you know, get their vaccine. Well, there was a lot of people in there that didn't feel that way. They said, hey, what kind of a slippery slope are we on? If we accept a government-mandated vaccine, what could that possibly lead to? So they can be broken up, and it's by, you know, very simple procedures. Asking a question over again. They will answer a question that you didn't even ask. Do that all the time. They'll rephrase your question. You're going to go back and say, no, 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 that's not what I meant. I meant this. And after a while, one of 2 things will happen. They'll either answer your question and give themselves away, or they'll blow up. And once they've done that, they've destroyed their own credibility. When someone gets angry at a person or at a crowd of people because they're persistent about having a question answered, that sets off the flags with the rest of the room.
Yeah, Ron almost got slapped in the face by the facilitator because he would get sticking to his guns. That was good.
Well, good for Ron, because that's the way to break this stuff up. Is there any questions that anyone has? Other than that, we'll, yes.
I just have a question about this. Sounds so scary to me. Like, I'm trying to